Chapter 33 of Free Air. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Free Air by Sinclair Lewis. Chapter 33, Tooth Mug Tea. My friend, Mr. Bill McGolwey. I knew him in Schoenstrom. Come on to Seattle for a while. Bill, these are some people I met along the road, Milt grumbled. Glad to meet 'em. Have a chair. Have two chairs. Say, Milt, you ought to have more chairs if you're going to have a bunch of swells coming to call on you. Ha ha ha. Say, I guess I better pike out and give the folks a chance to chin with you, Bill fondly offered. Oh, sit down, Milt snapped at him. They all sat down, four on the bed, and Milt's inner ear heard a mute snicker from the Gilsons and Saxton. He tried to talk. He couldn't. Bill looked at him and, perceiving the dumbness, gallantly helped out. So you met the kid on the road, eh? Good scout, Milt is. We always used to say at Schoenstrom that he was the best darn hand at fixing a flivver in 7 townships. So you knew Mr. Daggett at home. Now isn't that nice? Said Mrs. Gilson. Knew him? Say, Milt and I was brung up together. Why, him and I have bummed around together and worked on farms summers and fished for bullheads. Ever catch a bullhead? Damnedest slipperiest fish you ever saw, and got horns that sting the stuffin's out of you. And say, I wonder if Milt's told you about the time we had at a barn dance once. There was a bunch of hicks there, and I says, say, kid, let's puncture their tires and hide back of the manure pile and watch the fun when they come out. I guess maybe I was kind of stewed a little, to tell the truth, but of course Milt, he don't drink much. Hardly at all. Nice straight kid, if I do say so. Bill, Milt ordered, we must have some tea. Here's 6 bits. You run down to the corner grocery and get some tea and a little cream. Oh, you better buy 3-4 cups, too. Hustle now, son. Attaboy, yours to command, ladies and gents, like the fellow says, Bill boomed delightedly. He winked at Jeff Saxton, airily spun his broken hat on his dirty forefinger, and sauntered out. Charming fellow. A real original, crooned Mrs. Gilson. Did he know your friend Mr. Pinky? Asked Saxton. Before Milt could answer, Claire rose from the bed, inspected the Gilsons and Jeff with cold dislike, and said quietly to Milt, the poor dear thing, he was dreadfully embarrassed. It's so good of you to be nice to him. I believe in being loyal to your old friends. Oh, so do I, babbled Mrs. Gilson. It's just too splendid. And we must do something for him. I'm going to invite Mr. Daggett and Mr. McGollops, was it? To dinner this evening. I do want to hear him tell about your boyhood. It must have been so interesting. It was, mused Milt. It was poor and miserable. We had to work hard. We had to fight for whatever education we got. We had no one to teach us courtesy. Oh, now, with your fine old doctor father, surely he was an inspiration. Jeff didn't, this time, trouble to hide the sneer. Yes, he was. He gave up the chance to be a rich loafer in order to save farmers' babies for fees that he never got. I'm sure he did. I wish I'd known him. We need to know men like that in this pink frosting playing at living we have in cities, Claire said sweetly. Not to Milt, but to Jeff. Mrs. Gilson had ignored them, waiting with the patience of a cat at a mouse hole, and she went on, but you haven't said you'd come this evening. Do say you will. I don't suppose Mr. McGollops will care to dress for dinner. With saccharine devotion, Milt yearned back. No, Mrs. Gilson, no. Mr. McGolwey won't care to dress. He's eccentric. But you'll make him come. Milt was tactfully beginning to refuse when Gene Gilson at last exploded, turned purple, covered his dripping 2 red lips with his handkerchief. Then, abruptly, Milt hurled at Mrs. Gilson. All right, we'll come. Bill'll be awfully funny. He's never been out of a jerkwater burg in his life, hardly. He's an amusing cuss. He thinks I'm smart. He loves me like a dog. Oh, he's rich. Ha, ha, ha. Milt might have gone on. If he had, Mr. and Mrs. Gilson would have gone away, much displeased. But Bill arrived with some of the worst tea in the world and 4 cups tastefully done in Cupid's heads and much gilt. Milt made tea, ignoring them, while Bill entertained the Gilsons and Saxtons with Rabelaisian stories of threshing time when shirts prickly with chaff and gritty with dust stuck to sweat-dripping backs, of the funny thing of Milt and Bill being hired to move a garbage pile and swiping their employers' mushmelons, of knotting shirts at the swimming holes so that the bawling youngsters had to chew beef, of drinking beer in the livery stable at Melrose, of dropping the water pitcher from a St. Klopstock hotel window upon the head of the constable and escaping from him across the lean-to roof. Mrs. Gilson encouraged him. Bill sat with almost closed eyes, glorying in the saga of small-town life. Saxton and Gilson did not conceal their contemptuous grins. But Claire, after nervously rubbing the tips of her thumbs with flickering, agitated fingers, she had paid no attention to Bill and the revelation of Milt's rustic life. She had quietly gone to Milt to help him prepare the scanty tea. She whispered, "Never mind, dear. I don't care. It was all twice as much fun as being wheeled in lacy prams by cranky nurses, as Jeff and I were. But I know how you feel. Are you ashamed of having been a prairie pirate?" "No, I'm not. We were wild kids. We raised a lot of Cain, but I'm glad we did." "So am I. I couldn't stand it if you were ashamed. Listen to me and remember little Claire's words of wisdom. These fools are trying. Oh, they're so obvious. They're trying to make me feel that the prim Miss Boltwood of Brooklyn Heights is a stranger to you. Well, they're succeeding in making me a stranger. To them." "Claire, dear, you don't mind Bill?" "Yes, I do. And so do you. You've grown away from him." "I know, but today has been quite a test." "Yes, it has. Because if I can stand your friend Mr. McGolwey." "Then you do care." "Perhaps. And if I think that he's, oh, not much good, and I remember that for a long time you just had him to play with, then I'm all the more anxious to make it up to you. Don't be sorry for me. I can't stand that. After all, it was a good town, and good folks." "No, no, I'm not sorry for you. I just mean you couldn't have had so terribly much fun after you were 18 or so. Schoenstrom must have been a little dull after very many years there. This stuff about the charm of backwoods villages, the people that write it seem to take jolly good care to stay in Long Island suburbs." "Claire," he was whispering desperately, "the tea's most done. Oh, my dear, I'm crazy with this puttering around, trying to woo you, and having to woo the entire Gilson tribe. Let's run away." "No. First I'm going to convince them that you are what I know you are." "But you can't." "Huh. You wait. I've thought of the most beautiful, beastly cruel plan for the reduction of social obesity." Then she was jauntily announcing, "Tea, my dears. Jeff, you get the tooth mug. Isn't this jolly?" "Yes, oh yes, very jolly." Jeff was thoroughly patronizing, but she didn't look offended. She made them drink the acid tea and taste the chalk-like bread and butter sandwiches. She coaxed Bill to go on with his stories, and when the persistent Mrs. Gilson again asked the pariahs to come to dinner, Claire astonished Milt, and still more astonished Mrs. Gilson, by begging, "Oh yes, please do come, Milt." He consented savagely. "But first," Claire added to Mrs. Gilson, "I want us to take the boys to oh, I have the bulliest idea. Come, everybody, we're going riding." "Uh, where?" hinted Mr. Gilson. "That's my secret. Come." Claire pranced to the door, herded all of them down to the limousine, whispered an address to the chauffeur. Milt didn't much care for that ride. Bill was somewhat too evidently not accustomed to limousines. He wiped his shoes, caked with red mud, upon the seat cushions, and apologized perspiringly. He said, "Gee whillikins, that's a dandy idee. Telephone to bawl the chauffeur out with." And, "Are them flowers real, the bouquet in the vase?" But the Gilsons and Jeff Saxton were happy about it all, till the car turned from a main thoroughfare upon a muddy street of shacks that clung like goats to the side of a high cut, a street unchanged from the pioneer days of Seattle. "Good heavens, Claire, you aren't taking us to see Aunt Hattie, are you?" wailed Mrs. Gilson. "Oh, yes, indeed. I knew the boys would like to meet her." "No, really, I don't think Eva, my soul, Jeff and you planned our tea party today, and assured me I'd be so interested in Milt's bachelor apartment. By the way, I'd been up there already, so it wasn't entirely a surprise. "It's my turn to lead," she confided to Milt. "Dear old Aunt Hattie is related to all of us.